Have you ever felt someone slipping away, not in the dramatic, stormy way we see in movies, but in the quiet, almost imperceptible way that leaves you questioning everything? One day, their laugh feels like sunlight, their words like home. The next, there's a hesitation, a flicker of something unspoken. And that's when it starts. The overthinking, the self-blame, the late-night wondering if you said too much, cared too loudly, or loved too hard. But here's the thing no one tells you. The distance isn't always about you. I know that's hard to believe. When someone pulls away, our instinct is to turn inward, dissect every moment, looking for the thing that broke. Was it that time you opened up about your insecurities? Did you come on too strong when you shared your dreams? Did you text back too quickly, or not quickly enough? It's exhausting, isn't it? What if I told you the reason they're retreating isn't about a mistake you made, but a battle they're fighting? Not every act of pulling away is rejection. Sometimes it's fear. Fear of being seen too deeply, fear of losing themselves in the connection, or fear that they're not enough. And yet, we take their silence and weave it into a story of our own shortcomings. That's the tragedy of it all. We forget that relationships, even the best ones, aren't just about two people sharing space. They're about two people navigating their own inner worlds while trying to meet somewhere in the middle. So before you lose yourself in the endless spiral of what went wrong, pause. The answer may not be what you think, and sometimes understanding begins with realizing it's not always about you. 1. Stop taking their distance personally. Here's the hard truth. When someone pulls away, it's not always about you. But how often do we convince ourselves it is? We replay every conversation, overanalyze every text, and spiral into a pit of self-doubt, asking, "What did I do wrong?" This reaction is natural, but it's also a trap that turns their behavior into your burden. The reality is that people withdraw for countless reasons, and most of them have nothing to do with you. Maybe they're overwhelmed by something in their own life, a job they hate, unresolved trauma, or fears they don't know how to express. Maybe they need space to think, or they're wrestling with emotions they don't yet understand. These are battles happening inside them, not reflections of your worth. When you take someone's distance personally, you shift the focus to yourself instead of giving them the space they might need. It doesn't mean you shouldn't care. It means you should care differently. Instead of chasing them or demanding answers, try stepping back. Focus on what you can control, your own peace, your own growth. Understand this. Distance doesn't always mean rejection. Sometimes it's their way of regrouping, healing, or even protecting the connection they're afraid to lose. So instead of assuming the worst, meet their silence with patience. Trust that if the relationship matters, it will find its way back to balance. And if it doesn't, you've already taken the first step toward valuing yourself enough to let it go. 2. Understand that everyone has their own timeline. One of the hardest lessons to learn in relationships is this: people move at their own pace. You might be ready for deep conversations, emotional intimacy, or a stronger commitment, but that doesn't mean the other person is there yet. And that's okay. Relationships aren't races, and pushing someone to meet you where you are can often create more distance, not less. Think about it. How many times have you rushed to solve a misunderstanding or close the emotional gap, only to feel like the other person retreats even further? That's because when someone isn't ready to open up or move forward, pressuring them only amplifies their resistance. Instead of feeling understood, they feel cornered. Instead of connection, there's tension. People need time to process their emotions, their fears, and even their hopes. While you might be ready to dive in, they could still be wading through doubts or past wounds that have nothing to do with you. It's not about convincing them or waiting endlessly. It's about respecting their timeline without sacrificing your own needs. When someone pulls away, try asking yourself, am I holding space for them to move at their own speed? This doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means finding a balance between your desire for closeness and their need for space. The best connections grow not when both people are perfectly aligned, but when they're willing to respect each other's pace. Patience isn't weakness, it's the foundation of real, lasting understanding. 7. Prioritize self-respect over clinging to connection. When someone pulls away, the fear of losing them can make you cling tighter. You might find yourself bending over backward, ignoring your own needs, or compromising your self-respect just to keep the connection alive. But here's the thing. Any relationship that requires you to sacrifice your dignity isn't a healthy one. True connection can't thrive when it's built on one person giving and the other retreating. Self-respect doesn't mean cutting someone off the moment they show hesitation. It means knowing your worth and refusing to beg for someone's attention. When you prioritize self-respect, you show the other person and yourself that your value isn't tied to their approval. It sends the message that while you care deeply, you won't chase after someone who isn't ready to meet you halfway. This can be incredibly hard to practice, especially when your emotions are deeply invested. But self-respect is the foundation for any meaningful relationship. It's what keeps you grounded in your own worth, even when the other person seems uncertain about theirs. Take a moment to ask yourself, am I holding on to this connection because it's healthy, or because I'm afraid of letting go? If the answer is fear, it's time to refocus on yourself. By prioritizing your own well-being, you not only protect your heart, you also set the standard for how you deserve to be treated. And in doing so, you make space for the kind of love that values and uplifts you, not one that leaves you feeling depleted. 6. Accept that you can't control their feelings. One of the hardest truths to accept in any relationship is that no matter how much you care, you can't control how someone else feels. When they pull away, the instinct is to try and fix it, to do or say the right thing that will bring them back. But here's the reality. Their feelings are theirs alone. You can't force someone to stay connected, and you can't convince them to feel differently if they're in a place of doubt or uncertainty. This doesn't mean you shouldn't care. It means understanding that love, connection, and trust aren't things you can win through effort. When you base your actions on trying to change how someone feels, you end up putting all your energy into something you have no control over. This only leaves you feeling drained and defeated. Instead, focus on what you can control: your own actions, your boundaries, and how you respond to their distance. You can choose to approach the situation with kindness, patience, and respect for both yourself and them. But at the end of the day, they must decide how they feel and what they want. Letting go of the need to control doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting the process. If they come back, it'll be because they chose to, not because you forced them to. And if they don't, it's a sign to redirect your energy towards someone who's ready to meet you with the same level of care and commitment. 5. Learn to communicate without blame. When someone pulls away, it's easy to feel hurt, confused, or even angry. Those emotions are valid. They're signs of how much you care. But how you express them can either bring clarity or widen the distance. The temptation to lash out or place blame is strong. Why are you ignoring me? What's wrong with you? But blame doesn't create understanding. It creates defensiveness. Healthy communication starts with curiosity, not accusation. Instead of pointing fingers, try approaching the situation with empathy and openness. Say something like, "I've noticed some distance between us lately, and I just want to understand if something's going on. Are you okay?" This shifts the focus from confrontation to concern, creating a safer space for honesty. It's also important to own your feelings without making them the other person's fault. Instead of saying, "You're making me feel rejected," try, "I'm feeling a little unsure about where we stand, and I want to understand better." This small change in language can make a huge difference. It shows you're taking responsibility for your emotions while inviting them to share their perspective. Sometimes, they might not even realize they've been pulling away. Other times, they may struggle to explain what they're feeling. Either way, communicating without blame opens the door for a real conversation. It shows maturity and gives both of you a chance to rebuild trust. And if the relationship is worth holding on to, this approach will be the first step in bringing you closer. 4. Don't chase. Hold your ground instead. When someone starts pulling away, the instinct to chase can feel irresistible. You want to bridge the gap, fix what feels broken, and bring things back to the way they were. But here's the truth. Chasing someone who's retreating often drives them further away. The more you push to close the distance, the more they might feel the need to create it. Chasing stems from fear. The fear of losing them, of being misunderstood, or of facing the pain of uncertainty. But relationships built on chasing aren't balanced. One person ends up running, while the other exhausts themselves trying to keep up. Instead of creating connection, it creates tension and resentment. The key is to hold your ground, not in a cold, distant way, but in a way that says, "I value myself enough not to beg for your attention." This doesn't mean you stop caring or communicating. It means you step back and allow the other person the space to decide if they want to meet you halfway. True connections aren't forced, they're chosen. When you stop chasing, something remarkable happens. You reclaim your own power. You shift the energy from desperation to self-respect. And in doing so, you give the other person room to reflect. If they value the relationship, they'll take steps toward you. If they don't, you've saved yourself the pain of clinging to something that wasn't meant to last. Standing still isn't giving up. It's honoring your worth. 3. Recognize the role of emotional overwhelm. Sometimes when someone pulls away, it has nothing to do with disinterest or rejection. It's because they're emotionally overwhelmed. Life throws a lot at us. Stress at work, family issues, health concerns, or even old wounds that resurface unexpectedly. Add the complexity of a relationship to the mix, and it can feel like too much for some people to handle all at once. Here's the thing about emotional overwhelm. It doesn't always look like panic or visible distress. For many, it manifests as withdrawal, silence, or creating distance. It's not that they don't care, it's that they're struggling to process everything happening inside their head and heart. Relationships can stir up vulnerabilities they didn't know they had, and sometimes the easiest response is to pull back to protect themselves. When you sense someone pulling away, resist the urge to jump straight to conclusions. Instead, ask yourself, could they be carrying a weight I can't see? This perspective helps you approach the situation with empathy rather than frustration. It doesn't mean you have to accept being shut out indefinitely, but it allows you to shift your focus from blaming yourself to understanding their needs. Give them the room to breathe without taking their distance as a personal affront. Sometimes all someone needs is a little time to regain their footing, and if they're able to trust that you won't pressure them, they're more likely to come back on their own terms. Empathy opens doors that accusations never will. 8. Understand that silence speaks volumes. When someone pulls away, the silence they leave behind can be deafening. You're left staring at your phone, analyzing the gaps between messages, or replaying old conversations, trying to decode the quiet. It's tempting to fill that silence with explanations, apologies, or repeated attempts to reach out. But sometimes the silence itself is the message. Silence doesn't always mean they're angry or that you've done something wrong. More often, it's a reflection of their inner state, confusion, fear, or simply the inability to communicate what they're feeling. It's not easy to sit with that uncertainty, but learning to respect someone's silence is an act of emotional maturity. It shows you value their need for space without demanding instant answers. Instead of filling the void with overthinking or frantic efforts to reconnect, try reframing the silence. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this pause? Maybe it's a chance to reflect on the balance in the relationship or an opportunity to focus on your own needs. Silence can be uncomfortable, but it can also be clarifying. If the connection is genuine, the silence will eventually break, and meaningful communication will follow. And if it doesn't, that silence becomes an answer in itself, a reminder that relationships require effort from both sides. Respecting their silence isn't about giving up, it's about acknowledging that some things can't be forced. And in doing so, you show them and yourself that your worth doesn't depend on someone else's voice. And there you have it, the quiet truths about why people pull away and the lessons that come with it. But before we part ways here, I want to leave you with one last thought, something that might surprise you. This experience isn't just about them, it's about you. Think about it. Every moment of distance you felt from someone else is an invitation to look deeper, not only into the relationship, but into yourself. How do you handle uncertainty? Do you cling to control, or do you let go with grace? Do you allow silence to crush you, or do you rise stronger, more self-aware? Now it's your turn. Drop your insights below, hit the like button if this hit home, and subscribe so we can keep digging deeper. This space is as much yours as it is mine. Let's grow here, together.